Welcome to Campus Conversations with the President. Today I'm here with Professor John Bowles, the William P. Hobby Professor of History. Professor Bowles, of course, also the author of a biography of our first president, Edgar Odell Lovett, and indeed other books about the history of Rice. Welcome, Professor Bowles.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Now, this is, of course, our centennial year, and we're very excited about that celebration. And many of us are familiar with all the events, the murder and President Lovett's world travels leading up to the great celebration in October of 1912, culminating with his speech about the meaning of the new institution. And you've written extensively about those events. But today I thought we would focus a little bit of what happens after those events. We have this great celebration. People have come from all over the world. Everybody is very excited about the new institution finally open. We have a first class of students, some faculty. And then presumably they go away and the institution settles down to the daily tasks. So what then begins to happen? What are those first, say, 10 years of President Lovett's activities and the advancement of the then Rice Institute look like?
Well, I think after that sort of high of the opening, President Lovett had to deal with the sort of mundane parts of running a university. One of the more interesting things is he has to continue to employ more faculty and attract students. And the students themselves are creating a sense of college life, and they're creating organizations, the Thresher, the yearbook, the honor system, and so forth. And he's overseeing that. Quickly, but within a decade, though, things began to slow down. In 1925, the chemistry building is built. That's the next building after the original surge of buildings. Then in 1929, still Lovett has this sense of ambition and this sort of idea of a great university. Then the Great Depression hits. Early in his years, he had the kind of blip of World War I. But the Depression is more than a blip, and for more than 10 years, there's a shortage of funds. They have to cut back on the number of faculty. There's talk of cutting back on the number of students. No new buildings are built. There's a sense of sort of stagnation sets in. And I think one of the most important things that Lovett did is in the kind of low period of the 1920s, when it seemed...
It lasted almost a decade.
Yeah, it lasted
right?
really into World War II. This sense of stagnation and disappointment, he has to work to keep alive what I call the embers of the ambition. He wants people to, even though we're not being able to continue to grow and to build new buildings and so forth, he wants to keep alive that hope that Rice is to be a really first-rate university. And I think he succeeds. And even in really difficult times when in some sense not much happens, he keeps alive the sense that Rice does have a destiny that's just being put on hold but not being ended.
I mean, this time in history, just it seems that there's a lot going on. We have a lot of new inventions coming online, discoveries in areas like physics. What happens during World War I? Does that have much of an impact?
World War I is so quick that it does. It has, as I said, it's a blip, but it doesn't really cause much problem. The Great Depression, I think, really is a blow. And what he is aware that there are great new advances in science and so forth, and so he continues to bring speakers in from Europe and from all over the world. He feels at least that's a way to make Rice students and Rice faculty feel that they are a part of a great international body of learning. But then when World War II comes, that is more than a blip. And Rice changes its curriculum. Most of the men go off to war. Enlisted naval men come to campus as part of the V-12 program, and they wear uniforms and they go to school 6 days a week, not 12 months a year. So Rice, in some sense, takes on a very different nature during World War II.
Interesting. I guess in, say, the midst of the Great Depression, say the 1930s, President Lovett has been here 20 years. Mm-hmm. Do we know, is he giving any thought to, should he go on and do something else? Is it clear in his mind this is a lifelong project for him and that this is his job and for the rest of his working life?
I think a couple of times earlier he had wondered about that, but I think by 1925 or so he has sensed that this is to be his life work. By the late 30s, he realizes he's approaching 70. So in 1941, when he is 70, he announces he would like to resign. But the board asked him to continue through the war. So he ends up serving to 1946.
And what's then, so he comes out of the Depression almost right then into the war. Mm-hmm. What's Rice like during these wartime years?
Rice is much smaller than it is today. It's heavily male. Most of the regular men students, of course, have enrolled. There are still some women students, but again, enlisted naval men become part of the Rice student body as the so-called V-12 program. And again, they're paid, they wear uniforms, there are curriculum changes to in some sense prepare them for naval careers. So Rice takes on a surprising military character. And a lot of the most distinguished faculty are called away to do research for the government, either working on radar, for example, or the Manhattan Project. So the university's faculty shrinks, its student body changes, and it takes on a sort of a military character.
So different than during the Great Depression,
yes.
but still the problem of hard to advance the
Right.
ultimate ambitions
Right.
of the institution.
Right.
And President Lovett then, through really a great deal of his tenure, after all that kind of initial fanfare and the development of the institution, I think, as you put it, has to steward the institution and
Yes.
maintain these ambitions at a
Yes.
time where otherwise that
Right.
maybe we would have become satisfied with,
Right.
with being less.
Right. Then during World War II, ironically, more money becomes available because Will Rice dies and leaves several $1 million to Rice. And then shortly after World War II, we purchased the Rincon oil field. So just as President Lovett is getting ready to hand over the baton to the next leadership, Rice all of a sudden has more money. And the new president, William Houston, comes in under totally changed circumstances and completely with Lovett's ambition and Lovett's goodwill. The board now is able to do a lot of the things that Lovett would have liked to have done if the money had been there. And I think one of the very nicest things is that one of the trustees says to Lovett, when they do now have more money and they can begin to sort of recover that sense of ambition and talk about building new buildings and hiring new faculty, they say, we are now doing exactly what you could have done or would have done if the resources had been there. So Lovett is able to see, even though he's retired under William V. Houston, the doubling of the number of faculty, a surge of building, finally the creation of the college system. So by the time Lovett dies in 1957, he has seen, through the presidency of William V. Houston, Rice has really made this transition from sort of struggling in the Depression to becoming an absolutely first-rate regional university. And it has become a university, and that's the reason by June 30, 1960, the trustees changed the name from the Rice Institute to Rice University. And that by that time, President Houston has had a heart attack, and so he's not in full service. But by 1961, the Rice Institute, as the Rice University, is once again primed with a new leader to pick up upon that sense of ambition and grandeur that Lovett had spelled out in 1912. And the next president, President Pitzer, is the one who is able to make really significant changes.
And really go back to that original vision that President Lovett had.
Right.
And so we're indebted to him, not just for that original vision, but for stewarding the Institute, which ultimately becomes the university, through a pretty tumultuous
Yes.
period in American
Really
history.
hard times. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
It's been great to be with you and learn a little bit more about the history of Rice as we celebrate our centennial.
Thanks very much.